We have a really interesting session here today. Me and C are good friends, and we're very lucky and fortunate to have C with us from London today. C is not particularly from the iGaming industry, but with a very long CTO background. But before we begin today, I also want to fill in you guys a little bit more. We will talk specifically about AI and the current kind of strides that we are seeing within the field of AI, and what will this mean in the next, say, 1, 2, or 3 years with the advent of ChatGPT and so on and so forth. But this is a little bit of a starter here today. Like, how many people uses ChatGPT on a weekly basis, let's say? Hands up. All right, most people. How about on a daily basis? Oh yeah, so yeah, there you go. Fortunately, see, otherwise we would have been the wrong panelists here today. That's good to know. So obviously we have a room, quite mixed room here, but we're all aware of this technology, of course. But see, as a starting point here today, just as an introduction, see, you were born, now you are here. What happened in between?
Well, a lot. I've moved 4 different countries, bouncing back and forth. I would say this is the 3rd time I've lived in London. I would say I'm still trying to get my permanent residency. Somehow eludes me. And I met you, which is one of the key moments.
That's a good start.
Sure. And I'm also very honored to be invited to speak here. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. And so see, can you talk a little bit more about your background and your career? Obviously, you're a very experienced CTO on the tech side of things. Can you talk about your previous experiences so far?
Sure. So, I'm a software engineer by training, and that's very important for me as my passion and identity. But I'm also an entrepreneur, by passion. So 10 years ago, I left my job at Goldman Sachs to co-found my first company. And since then, I've worked in a variety of sectors, in music, in crypto, video games, and legal, and always building consumer-facing products. Because I really love creating that magical experience and see the delight on our users' faces. And I'm currently working on my 4th venture, where leveraging the power of generative AI to lower the barrier for people to create digital experiences and games, so that anyone with a creative idea, but not necessarily the technical background, should be able to essentially manifest their vision in the digital realm. And we believe that time is now to make this leap forward. And can't really wait to see what people create with our technology.
Amazing. So see, as a starting point here in this discussion, from a layman point of view, from myself and many others, I suppose, the advent of ChatGPT seemed like a huge development, almost from one day to the other. It felt like the world changed in a way, and a lot of people speculated, is this now start of something exponential that will just keep to advance and advance? But for someone like you who has been in this world for much longer than us, what's your views on kind of the launch of ChatGPT? Was it as big of a step from one day to the other as it comes across from the outside, or how do you view this development?
Sure. I guess just a bit of a background. Artificial intelligence. The research started probably back in the 70s, right? And and every decade there is a breakthrough or a capture the public imagination. And what we're seeing recently with ChatGPT, I would say, is sort of like the generative AI as opposed to AI in general. I think the biggest shift is that the ability for computers to really express themselves in a way that humans like we can appreciate, both say with ChatGPT as well as the text to image, things like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. Suddenly we can sort of communicate or appreciate the minds or the creativity of a computer, and that just, I guess, seemed to come out of nowhere. But really, for example, we've had GPT-2, GPT-3, over the last many years. And I think it is a steady progression, but just recently, it is really the communicative ability of AI that has gone through a step change that's really captured the public imagination.
Right. So if we fast forward in 1 year's time when we're back here on stage, will we have a third robot here that can also join this panel, or do you think this exponential curve is actually not?
We wouldn't be here. We'll just be AI overlords
We'll be
all
NPCs.
over, right?
Yeah.
No, I think that's the thing. I think it's it's easy to be caught up in the hype, and I think right now also we have this culture of everyone trying to get attention for I guess themselves by creating clickbait or headliners. Like that's the general practice of people wanting to promote and themselves for right reasons. So there is a lot of sort of singular example that's been given to people saying, I asked ChatGPT this one thing and it produces amazing results, and here it is, right? And that certainly can happen, but it's also to kind of like keep everything to perspective. It is a steady progression of things, and we're not going to be taken over by AI just yet. I think a more interesting question is, would we see that in our lifetime? And I would say probably, and it is something that I try not to think about too much because it does keep me up at night. So yeah.
We've had very late night discussions about this before. I know that. So you feel that the kind of the current progression and the hype around AI, it's a little bit overhyped, perhaps even?
I guess, yeah, like in terms of the absolute hype that we're all going to lose our jobs, that everything's going to be done by AI tomorrow, I think that is certainly not the case. On the other hand, I do see this as an incredible disruptive technology there's no other technology that I've seen in the last, 20 years of my career that even comes close, right? It just, in comparison, we had the iPhone, it took 10 years for iPhone to kind of like cover the entire globe. It's just the speed of which that things are spreading, and the utility this thing offers. So it can absolutely touch every aspect of our lives, right? Just because you can interface with a language. So anyone can do it. You don't need a computer science degree to take advantage of this. And also over the last 20 years, we've have this startup culture, and people know how to, we have a hustler culture, we have a startup culture, so everyone's hustling, everyone is trying to create disruptive technology using AI, so everything just compounds. And I will say definitely you have to pay very close attention to this. It will absolutely sneak up on you if you look the other way for, any amount of time.
But I mean, aren't we already seeing a lot of disruption taking place? There was a big writers' strike in the US recently, where writers went on strike, obviously, not wanting to be replaced by ChatGPT. I think that would be kind of the most obvious example. But do you see other roles, perhaps other jobs, being at risk in the near term? If we take out writers from the equation, for example, copywriters and so on.
Yeah, so I would say for people who are, if you think about people who are at the forefront of their creative field, right, like artists, writers who are creating one-of-a-kind pieces, who are, I guess, tastemakers, musicians who are making unique, I guess, pieces, art pieces, and creativity. I think AI still has a long way to go to really get, AI, you can think of it as like a junior or an intern, a very, very enthusiastic, highly productive, but rather inexperienced, intern, or maybe a room full of interns. So it is up to us to make use of that resource. But it's not going to, it's certainly not true that a room full of infinite monkeys can produce Shakespeare. I think you still need someone to curate and to really add to and elevate. On the other hand, I think there are a lot of kind of boilerplate work that we do every day, the really boring stuff that kind of make us hate our jobs. Those can definitely be sort of like taken up by AI. So the way I see it is, AI is here to help us get rid of the boredom in our jobs and help us be more productive. But the dilemma, of course, is if everyone becomes twice as productive, will there be twice as much work for everyone? Maybe, that's the answer.
And if we flip the question around instead, are there jobs that you feel that are not as risked, perhaps in the medium and long term by AI? If we rewind the tape a couple of years, what people were talking about back then was that truck drivers, for example, was going to be out of a job. That was like the first people who would lose their jobs, or people who are basically operating machinery that can be taken off by AI, and creative jobs were always going to be safe. Right. But it's a little bit the feeling that it's like roles reversed at this point. Like if we look at the long term, what do you think?
Jobs are going to be ironclad, but here we are. Yeah, it is interesting, right? Because physical and people work, hospitality, anything to do with human-to-human interactions. Like AI is not really there to it's not really there to replace that or to really even help with that type of things. And when you talk about robotics, that's much further away than what AI can do. Kind of in an interesting turn of events, like anything to do with physical work is actually, less affected by the current state of AI development than, say, knowledge work.
Right. So I'm Swedish, right? And we have a famous scientist, Max Tegmark, who's out of MIT in the US, who has kind of called for a break of development of AI, considering the big strides that we've seen now in the recent couple of months, to kind of safeguard ourselves from repercussions from moving too fast in this field, basically. Is that something you agreed on as well? Should there be a break? Should we kind of like be more careful in where this is all heading? Like, AKA, like, will we see Terminators at the end of the day?
Right. I mean, should we stop doing the things that we think is super harmful to the planet and to ourselves? The answer is sure, probably helpful, but is it practical? Should we stop? Name a habit that you think is really bad for you, but you just can't stop, right? Or, name an industry practice. But in general, I don't think it's really looking more at the goal of this petition is to raise awareness, and the ultimate goal is to, I guess, stop a malevolent AGI from developing. We don't want Skynet, we don't want Terminators. I guess that's ultimately what this movement is trying to stop. So I'm more interested in the solution that will get us there rather than just this, should we stop, as opposed to this one act that we are banking on. I think it is helping raise awareness, and to that end, I think it's good. But also, I don't think me personally, I don't think we're particularly close to the point of no return. I guess I'm optimistic about that. And we can talk more about, why I think that way, like what would take for AGI to really come about.
Right. And so I guess that leads into a little bit to the next question, which is like, are we approaching a true AGI, like an artificial general intelligence, so the singularity, where the AI can basically start learning it by itself and take its own decision and so on? Yeah,
like I said, depends on the time horizon. If you're thinking the next year, even 5 years, I would say it's extremely unlikely. Would it happen in our lifetime? And also, I guess, your definition of AGI. So, I work with, AI tools every day, and I think right now AI is extremely good at creating very impressive things. We call it, it's very good at doing party tricks. But when you ask it to do something very, very specific that you need, like I'm trying to get it to write code to build games based on the user prompt. It's like pulling teeth. It's just really, really difficult, and it's not ready, right? I'm waiting for GPT-5 to come out for it to really be much better at this job. And so GPT-4 is certainly not certainly not AGI, and 5, if it's based on the same architecture, extremely unlikely.
Right. Yeah. So it can help you write code for a game like Snake, but as a party trick, as you mentioned, but not more genuine and original content.
I wanted you to change one bit of this thing that you wrote. It'll just change random other parts as well, because it is just, end of the day, currently GPT-4 is just a word predictor, right? It is basically trying to essentially predict the next word, next sentence, next block of text based on context. And it's, it's easy for us to think of it as a human, and it really must have deep understanding of structure, of intent, and everything, and therefore it's producing the output, because that's how we would do it. But the reality is, it does not think like a human. We don't really know how it does it, but from my observation, there's a big part of it is just basically trying to predict based on the other things it has seen. So it's very hard for it to be specific, because all the things it has seen is all kind of like munched up in its head. And then we ask for one thing, it just automatically brings up other things, and it will try to add other things into it based on the context.
Right. And so for yourself, say, like, what are some of the most interesting and useful use cases that you've seen to date using tools like ChatGPT, Midjourney, other kind of text-to tools?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting because, for all the hype, there actually hasn't been any like breakout products that's being launched, as far as I know, that, like all the big companies has launched like AI features to their existing products, which has been amazing, right? I've never seen companies move so fast. Every company has rolled out, massive lineups of like things. But on the other hand, like small companies, startups, has really not turned, like you have loads of open source projects and also people making proclamations on Twitter about individual use cases. But as a product, it actually hasn't really changed. I think, I guess in my personal experience, when you actually try to get down to, you have a vision in your mind, and you maybe think 5 years from now, this should be possible, and then you actually sit down and try to use GPT-4 or other AI APIs, it's just not quite there yet. So I think there is still a gap between, like GPT as a product itself is amazing, but if you wanted to use it, build other things on top, it's still quite difficult.
Right.
Not to say that there isn't, because it's so hard to keep track of every single product that ever comes on the market. Maybe there's one being announced on Twitter right now.
Right. But yourself, I mean, you use ChatGPT. You admit it here every day. What do you use it for?
So the things I use it for, mainly I just wrestle with it, trying to get it to write code. Like there's no one thing, and I use it to, I guess, for communication, to help me write emails, websites, and we're also trying to create a model to guide like human conversation. So a big part of what our product is, it is a conversation that you have with this tool that then will produce the output for you, right? So there's all of these different aspects of GPT-4 or ChatGPT that we're exploring, trying to get the feel of its capabilities, trying to coerce it into creating things and creating sort of external structures so that it will, for it to lean on, give it the right context so it will produce the right output. And it's very much kind of like a black arts, and you follow sort of like people online, people talk about things that they've discovered, ways to prompt GPT to produce a specific kind of output. And this is not designed by the engineers at OpenAI. This is just people discovering how to interact with, and that's quite an interesting thing. It's like going back to the dark ages. If you dance around in a circle and then say the magic word, it'll do the thing you want. Yeah.
No, so the engineers, there isn't a handbook to use ChatGPT. Essentially, people are figuring out what this can do along the way. Essentially.
And then a new version comes out, and a new set of magic word becomes possible.
Right. So Sequoia Capital, one of the biggest investment funds in the world, the CEO there admittedly said that we are going into this new hype cycle now, where a lot of AI companies will be funded, a lot of them will fail, but an incredible amount of capital will be flowing into this field at the moment. Do you think as well, will we see kind of a new wave of say the next Facebook or the next generation massive tech companies being born out of this hype cycle that we see today? Will they also struggle? Because I know you talked previously about kind of the analogy to the 80s of companies who started producing hard drives, for example, and how they became obsolete by the time they were done. And it feels like similar thing is happening here.
Yeah, I guess I also kind of follow, I guess, people in Silicon Valley. So what everyone seems to be saying is that, you can think of it as search, right? Search, if you invested in the first, 5 big startups in search, you would have made no return, but, until Google came along. So it could be extremely early days. It could be many years, or maybe everything's accelerated. Maybe it's like many months, but certainly there could be, whatever is the next trillion-dollar company may not actually have been started yet. So there is, even though everything's moving super quickly, there is also some patience is required for things to play out, but also keeping an eye to make sure when it does happen, it's not missed.
Yeah, fair enough. And so it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, Hetzi, but it seems like the kind of advancements that we've seen in the last year is kind of this particular approach to AI, which is through large language models, LLMs, which GPT is essentially. Are there limitations with this approach to AI? And can you explain maybe perhaps to the audience as well, and to myself for that matter, more in detail, like what is an LLM exactly? How does this systems function?
Sure. So, a large language model, fundamentally, in this particular case, is a transformer model. At the baseline, as I mentioned earlier, it is, taking the context, it is taking all of the training data that's embedded in the parameters, and it's trying to essentially predict the next word, right? It's doing word prediction, albeit an extremely intelligent one based on its knowledge. So you train this model based on, trillions of terabytes of data, like trillions of words, and it has within its parameters all the knowledge that is being embedded into it. And when you give it context, when you give it a prompt, it is just basically saying, wow, I think the next word should be such. What is surprising to everyone is that this simple approach seems to have given rise to extremely succinct and logical outputs. And what OpenAI has done with their reinforcement training is making this model output human accessible outputs to basically teach the AI how to communicate with humans in a very human-like way, right? And so, but the fundamental limitation, it's still, there is a finite textual window that you can give it context. So as you chat with ChatGPT, you will eventually gradually forget the earlier conversation you have. It has no long-term memory.
I can relate to that, by the way, but
yeah.
when I communicate with other people.
I mean, maybe more so, yeah, like I guess maybe we're just large language models with slightly larger text windows. So I would say in general, of course, since this particular thing, it has already exhibited surprising behavior. So I guess I cannot say definitively that it won't surprise us again if you 10x the parameter size. But it just seems, I guess most people would think that given the current architecture, it is not going to make that leap to AGI. It will continue to surprise and perhaps become extremely useful. But to achieve true AGI, we kind of expect there to be another architectural shift to come along to really kick it into the next gear, which may happen next month, may happen in 5 years' time, or it may not happen for a long time. So it just depends.
Right. So it's not the size of the parameters.
Yeah. So I have a friend who works at DeepMind, and I just remember he went out for drinks and asked him about this, and he kind of looked me in the eye and he's like, Z, I don't think we can go to the moon by building taller ladders. And so, in his mind, GPT is like a ladder. Right now, it's like a very tall ladder. But I think to achieve AGI, I guess in his mind, and I tend to agree with him, there's still a number of hurdles or barriers that needs to break through.
Right.
Which is good because
you don't get to the moon by building a tall ladder. I like that.
Yes.
So I was speaking to a friend recently. As professionals, we wake up in the morning. We wake up to an inbox that is full of emails, and you get a sense of calmness when you have like 0 zero unreplied emails in your inbox. Like, it's kind of like that's what we chase every day to some extent. And we talked about like how do you get to zero inbox? And the solution to zero inbox is not to answer all your emails. It is to not answer your emails. Because when you answer all your emails, you then get replies back and you go into an infinity loop. But we talked about this, Microsoft is introducing the Copilot in Office 365 later on this year, probably. And it will have the ability to kind of suggest replies to your emails. So in other words, the AI will be able to kind of take over and start replying to your emails. So my question to you, C, is the Microsoft Copilot a source for zero inbox, or is it a source for infinite inbox?
Yes.
Both, okay.
I think the question too, or look, I mean, I have a cheeky answer to that.
Like when AI started to communicate with each other, is that just going to mean that we'll have infinite communication?
Yeah, I think ultimately, but that's the exciting part. Ultimately, I think the decision is on us. Just like with now, when you have a large inbox, it's like the faster you reply, the more inbound you're going to get, right? So at some point, you make a decision. It's like, I'm not going to reply outside of work hours. I'm not going to reply on weekends. Or I'm not going to reply to a certain type of email. That kind of stops it from coming. I guess to answer that question, I think the decision ultimately lies with us. We have the ability to create infinite emails. We'll have the ability to send out infinite emails to other people, right? And then they have the ability to sort of defend that by whatever means that it's at their disposal. I think, it's kind of like an arms race of communication, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm certainly looking forward to that point where I don't have to answer 95% of the irrelevant emails that I'm getting. Final question for you today, C. What are you most excited about, perhaps, when you think about the development of AI? Is there anything like particularly that you are looking forward to, or that you hope will happen?
So I was listening to this podcast, and someone made one of the Silicon Valley VCs made this interesting point. It's like, well, with AI, the amount of advancements in medical research is going to accelerate like never imagined. And suddenly it becomes, he said, I used to be very disappointed that I'm going to be the last generation of humans to not live past 100. But because of AI, I now am very, very sure that I will live to 180. So, and I heard that, I'm like, and I do agree with him. And when I heard that, I started exercising again, because now I realize for every extra year I get, then there is an increased chance that I'll get to live another 10. So I leave that thought with you guys. And basically the conclusion with AI is go exercise and live a healthy life, and we'll see you back here in like 100 years.
That's brilliant, C. Thank you so much for today. Thanks for coming by all the way from London. Thank you, guys. Thank you.